Hello, this is Casey Kalini reporting for Food Navigator from Food Vision 2014 in Cannes, and I'm delighted to be joined by Michelle Greenwald, the CEO of Inventors, and Peter Venstorm, the founder of the Healthy Marketing team. We've heard presentations from both of these guys today about innovation and what companies should be doing in terms of starting in innovation and then delivering an end product. So let's dig into that a bit more. Peter, starting firstly with you, we heard a lot from you about sort of a brand space, a category space. Could you tell me a bit more? Are there limitations when it comes to innovation?
Well, understanding the brand innovation space or category innovation space means that you actually understand how consumers view your brand and your category. So as we are doing, working in the area of food and nutrition, it means that very often consumers have very sort of set understanding of what is a soft drink, what is a cheese. And also in that sense, you could say, initially it gives you limitations for what can you actually do with the cheese, unless you sort of take the responsibility to try to change that a little. But it does mean you're going through a very sort of clear understanding from consumers. Same thing with brand innovation space, is what consumers expect you to do. As we said, I'm Swedish, so use Volvo as an example. Wherever I go on earth, I ask the question, what does Volvo stand for? People say safety. So it means they know what to expect tomorrow. And with every brand you can ask the same question, and if the brands are strong or articulated, every consumer can tell you what they expect from the brand tomorrow. So respecting that means you can actually be successful with innovation. And we very often see companies actually disrespecting consumers, because they have sort of ideas what they want to do, or brands they want to leverage, or ingredients or technologies they want to use. So they squeeze that into the brand or squeeze that into category. But it doesn't mean that it should restrict your innovation.
Okay, so it's getting that sort of balance between really understanding what that consumer's expectations are and perhaps innovating within those.
And to understand from a life cycle point of view, do I need to go back and re-educate consumers, or can I jump straight into the mass market where things are defined?
Right. Michelle, how do you think the end consumer plays into innovation from start to finish? Where do they fit?
Where do they fit? It's interesting to, first of all, observe their behavior ethnographically to understand how they interact with the product, how it fulfills their lives. You can interview them to find out unmet consumer needs and brands that they like and don't like. So I think it's critical to get consumers involved along the way. And then once you have concept ideas and prototypes, it's great to get consumer feedback. If you ask them very generally, what do you want, they may have trouble answering you, but if you give them something to respond to, then you can see whether they buy into it or not.
Okay. And in your presentation, Michelle, we heard a lot about drawing inspiration from perhaps industries that you wouldn't even maybe consider.
Right.
And why do you think that's so important?
Because if you just stay in your industry, you're just going to come up with innovations that are very close into where you are. But there's so many examples of the greatest innovations where one industry is influenced by an entirely different industry.
Okay.
And I can give you examples of those, but basically, if you want to innovate in a bigger way and have a bigger impact and be more unique, I think you need to do things that have never been done before. And there's a lot of transferability of ideas between one industry and another.
But how do you do that without creating a disconnect between the consumer, like we were saying? I mean, you know, their expectations might not be innovating that creatively. How do you manage that?
Once they see the idea, I showed an example today where an architecture firm had to develop a viewing tower, and they looked at a honey dipper for inspiration. And it was interesting, instead of having discrete levels of a building on a tower, they had something that went around for several levels and enabled people to descend. It was a better experience. So once they see it, it doesn't mean that it doesn't make sense.
Okay.
But it's just that whoever's inventing needs to have the idea. I gave an example of the Nike waffle trainer sneaker, where one of the founders of Nike was inspired by a waffle iron to create a kind of networked effect within the sole of the sneaker. So once consumers kind of get it, if you can communicate it in a simple way to them, it doesn't mean that they don't buy into it. It may make great sense.
Okay. How important is that simplicity, Peter, getting the, you know, you've done all your work on innovating, developing a new product, but then communicating that to the consumer
Well, that is key. I mean, so that's very much what my book about the 4 factors is about, is to understand that the consumers very often need to take a decision in a couple of seconds. Then it's just a matter of understanding what's the benefit of this product for me. So we are working as we are working in the nutrition industry, then we often are discussing about claims, about nutritional messages, etc., that comes from a almost like scientific background. And then to convince companies that they actually need to translate it to consumer understandable language and a relevant benefit means that you need to have this kind of transition between one culture and another one. And those who do that successfully are successful. And those who do not do it, they're still struggling in that sort of claims jungle. That's like a red herring. It has no relevance for consumers, but because since you can't get one, it's interesting. So and that is a challenge, to actually respect consumer understanding and language.
Yeah.
That's a challenge.
Yeah. I mean, just looking at what the food industry is doing, are they doing a good job of innovating and connecting with consumers?
It depends. One of the things that I'm finding fascinating, and probably the biggest trend that I'm observing in the food industry, is combining things.
Okay.
So they're combining, in the United States, for example, cronuts are hugely successful, which is a combination of a donut and a croissant. You have pretzel chips, where you're looking at a combination between pretzels and chips, or brownie cookies, French toast bagels. So much is becoming a hybrid, and consumers are familiar with one and the other, and they're finding the combination kind of novel. And it's giving you a wider audience, because then you have the potential to source sales from 2 different categories.
But you're still kind of grounded, like we were saying, within that brand space and the expectation.
Right. And then one other area I think that's very interesting is bringing foods from one country to another. So it might be may have been in one culture for hundreds or thousands of years, but bringing it to another country is making it new and novel. But I think people now, they're traveling more, they're more open to other ethnicities in terms of cuisine, and so people are buying into it. They're able to accept it and like it, actually.
All right. Well, look, thank you so much for taking a few minutes to give your insights there. And thank you for listening to this Food Vision 2014 video. I'm Casey Kalini.